Welcome to Conscious and Curious with Crystal Schultz, where we deep dive into the questions and mysteries of life. We learn through the personal stories of individuals and topics such as philosophy, esoteric truths, wellness, religion, and spirituality. With meaningful conversations and thought-provoking ideas, we'll learn together and hopefully inspire consciousness and intentional living. Let's dive in. Welcome to Conscious and Curious with Crystal Schultz. And welcome today our guest, Jill Freestone. Jill is a very good friend of mine who I love dearly. And we have been planning a very special podcast for you today. Jill is a really, really wonderful person with so much knowledge in many areas. She is a life coach. She has gleaned so much knowledge. I'm going to let her do more introduction of herself because she has so much valuable knowledge to share in so many areas. So she'll be able to expound on that more. But today's episode is about OCD and scrupulosity. And, we're unconscious and curious, trying to tap into the realm between not just I guess you could say like spirituality, but also we're tapping into like mental health and wellness and body, all the different aspects that come together in that scenario. So we're tapping into this because one, it's wellness and it's mental health, but also scrupulosity touches into religious and spiritual aspects. So I thought this would be a really wonderful topic to broach. And thank you so much, Jill, for being here. I am so excited for this conversation, and I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself with a little more info and take it away.
Thanks, Crystal. I so appreciate this opportunity and just love Crystal. She brings so many gifts and her presence to my life. I appreciate that. And I'm a life coach currently and have been for over 6 years. And I'm starting my master's in marriage and family therapy and am a somatic experiencing practitioner. That's a 3-year program with Peter Levine's trauma body-based healing method. And with those different aspects, my focus has been on helping people with anxiety and anger, these two big emotions, and how those interact with relationships, your relationship with yourself and with your family members. So a lot of how to communicate about these and how to process them and how that can cause conflict in those areas. And so with the master's degree, being able to more fully support the family members and then also to be able to do OCD therapy. And so I love what I do, and I'm grateful for the experiences that I have with the clients that I have.
Thanks so much, Jill. Jill has done a number of wonderful things. So we've done a number of wonderful things together. And I love that her knowledge base ranges so much. Like you've done a lot of life coaching. We did an Sacred Daughters together, and she helped us process anger. And we've also done drum circles. Jill is wonderful at facilitating drum circles, but also individually. The people that she's coached have come away with so much benefit. So, and you're just quite a researcher too. Like you have so much information and knowledge, and you've created applicable ways to share them with other people, to share them in your practice. So I think that's fantastic. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. I did forget about the drum circles. I'm going to be leading one next weekend again, just helping to process anger in some different ways. I've taken some drum facilitator courses and done another one recently, just the impact of what's going on in our world currently too, and being able to process a lot of that through rhythm. It's really powerful.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I've definitely had really amazing experiences in your drum circles. So thank you for doing that for people. So we're going to jump in first and talk about Jill's story. And then we'll go into more of what OCD is and scrupulosity and the misconceptions. And hopefully, if there's time, get to some red flags of how would I even know if I have scrupulosity. So But let's start with your story, Jill. I don't know where you would feel the beginning is, but I guess the question comes to my mind is like, how did you first recognize something was off or that you had OCD? Where would you consider the beginning actually?
So, in your question of how did I know something was wrong, it was a gradual over time. And I think that I was a life coach for a few years and didn't realize that in continuing to get coached on certain topics and the rising resentment and anger I started feeling towards certain things that were religious or moral, I didn't realize that those things were related to obsessions and compulsions, but I believed that I could just coach myself through or get therapy enough to remove those issues. And in doing the long conversations and the research and the therapy and coaching sessions, I was actually engaging in compulsions and making the OCD
Oh,
worse.
wow.
And so it was understanding in searching and searching for more answers that I came across someone who was giving a broader understanding of what OCD was and what scrupulosity was, instead of just the narrow definition of what you might think scrupulosity is. And so then I was able to expand because I don't have the characteristic scrupulosity that people think of. That's kind of how that happened. And so, in mentioning this small type of scrupulosity, let me just define that there are a lot of myths about OCD and scrupulosity that keep people from being diagnosed. And
Okay.
and so just understanding that OCD is much bigger than those myths that we see on the media, that all neat freaks have OCD, or it's a preference for organization or details, or that it's fun to have organization or symmetry, or it's just about hand washing, or that it's rare and it's only the weird, neurotic, or crazy people, or we're all a little OCD. So those are all myths and they're not true. It's not a personality quirk or a character trait, even though some people have those things. Those aren't what OCD is, if we could look at the whole big picture. And so it's important to notice that most people who have OCD have the type that have compulsions that are in your head. And so you don't see it.
Mhm.
Some people call that pure O or pure OCD, where you're doing this internally. And so you don't see the hand washing or the symmetry or the organizing. And so you think it's just anxiety, or you've lived with it your whole life, so you think it's normal. And so just being able to say that for it to be OCD, we just need to have these three things: that there need to be obsessions or intrusive thoughts, compulsions, or something you do to get rid of the anxiety you feel about the obsession or the intrusive thought. And then it also needs to be interfering with your life to a certain degree. Because sometimes we are like, oh, I must have things in this certain way. And so I'm OCD and I just have to do it. But that's a very low level. And there's a disagreement between people whether or not we can all have a little bit of OCD or not. Some people say that's offensive to people who have OCD because you're kind of enjoying it and you're having fun with it. And then there's also that, sure, you might have a little bit, but it doesn't interfere with your life. So there's a spectrum of how people feel about that. But I think that's important to look at. And then also, it takes people an average of 14 years to get the right help with scrupulosity. And
Wow.
especially scrupulosity, but also OCD in general as well. Scrupulosity, it's even harder. But
And is that sorry to interject, is that to just get it diagnosed
it's
properly,
to get
or
it
is that
diagnosed and
treatment?
to get the accurate treatment, both.
Wow.
Because so many people get diagnosed, but then they're they're in therapy still, and the therapist is actually reinforcing the OCD without realizing it. I see that probably every month with people coming to me.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's incredible.
because
So,
there's such a misunderstanding of how to do therapy or coaching on OCD. I mean, I tell coaches not to do it at all, but it's so tricky because it jumps, and it's so tricky to not try to help someone to figure out and think through and do CBT on their obsession and their compulsion. And that CBT, that thinking through thoughts and trying to figure it out, generally becomes a compulsion. And so you're feeding.
Right. CBT being cognitive
Cognitive
behavioral
behavioral
therapy.
therapy, meaning you can change your thoughts and change your feelings, and you can think through things in different ways, which is
Gotcha.
very important for OCD, but not when we use it as a compulsion.
Makes sense. Okay.
So
So you would say, let's define in simple terms then, what is OCD? You said there's the three
the three
qualifiers.
things. It needs to have the obsessions, the compulsions, and the level that it's interfering with your life.
What would that look like?
So to like, there's questions on the diagnostic, like the DSM, that say, how many minutes or hours a day are you spending doing compulsions? How often are you having intrusive thoughts? And how much time are you obsessing about the thing?
Right.
And
Or say if it's
how does
something.
it make it, how hard does it make it for you to do your daily tasks? How many things do you avoid?
Mm,
How many things are interrupted, or you're not able to even start because you're busy doing the compulsions and obsessions?
that makes sense.
And then how intense is your anxiety? Like, how is it making it so that your level quality of life is not good because you're so distressed? The panic attacks are so high.
Okay. And then scrupulosity, how would you define it?
Yeah, so scrupulosity would be the when the obsessions and compulsions are either religious in nature or moral or ethical. For some people, it's lumped all into scrupulosity, but others divide it into moralosity or moral scrupulosity and scrupulosity OCD or religious OCD or religious scrupulosity. Those are the different names that people are using for it. And for scrupulosity, you're going to see a specific religious anxiety or religious perfectionism or a lot of doubting. Some people call it the doubting disease. And there's this really strong focus on what is right or
What
wrong.
do you mean by doubting? Like, because when you hear doubting in religious terms, I think like, oh, they're doubting religion,
No,
but
it's
not that.
doubting, it's self-doubt usually.
Okay. Always thinking you must be wrong.
Am I wrong? Am I doing something wrong? Is God disappointed in me? Have I possibly done something wrong? Um, am I doing the right thing? So I think that it's this fixation on what's right and wrong and making sure you're on one side, but never really being able to be sure.
Right.
And so like you need to be morally good and follow rules, but then you obsess about either what the rule is and who's following it and if I could possibly have messed up and am I sure. And so this trying to figure out and being able to, like, it can lead you to like pray all day long to try and find certainty or to confess over and over again for this moment that you might feel sure. But the OCD
Yeah.
makes it so that you will never feel that way no matter what.
Right.
And so the uncertainty is a key characteristic of all OCD and the search for it. So there's this urgency and this search for certainty. So that's one thing that can help you look for.
Yeah.
Like, am I searching, finding, trying to figure out that?
Uncertainty. I was considering this a little while ago and reading something that brought this topic up of certainty is really a search for safety,
Mm-hmm.
correct? And
Yes and
it's
no.
just, but this is a compulsive way to search for something that feels safe. But I'd say in OCD, doesn't that typically mean it's not necessarily something that's safe, like tapping something? That's not necessarily going to make you safe, but it's something that releases the pressure valve, right?
Yes and no. And like with like going around to check all of the locks, like you can
Mhm.
logically see that it's locked, but then you'll go back and you'll doubt that. But with
Right,
religion and moral ethics, it's not something you can see and define. It's
right,
subjective to so many things. And so even if you read something in scripture or hear a talk or a speech or something, there's going to be this endless rumination and research and discussion to try and find the certainty. And people define it in different places. But then we have like doctrine that's defined and says that it's that way, but then there's interpreted doctrine. And so it becomes really
right.
complex. And so it's not
Yeah.
just a sense of safety for the people, it's I believe I can actually find it. And because there are people who say, yes, this is what it is, just like the
Yeah.
locked door. So I think that the trick with scrupulosity is that learning to live with uncertainty is what faith is. But most people with that don't believe that. They believe they are the exception and that there's some other actual rigidity in there. But it actually feels like letting go of faith, but it's actually a more healthy version of faith, but it doesn't make sense. And it's also tricky to diagnose because the behaviors are often rewarded as highly righteous or obedient. And
Right.
so it reinforces. And when you see someone on the outside, they're checking all the boxes that are required for religion or moral behavior. But we want to know what's the why behind it. What is the urgency and the pressure of why they're doing this? And some of them feel like, well, yeah, the spirit's telling me to do these things. I'm obedient. I'm doing what's right. So that's kind of the trick there of like it's good to repent, it's good to feel guilty when I do something wrong. I need to
Yeah.
do these things. So just to kind of explain for me what it looks like when I was diagnosed, and this was 3 years ago or 4 years ago, 4 years ago now, that the important step is to list your obsessions and then list your compulsions. So to list what my obsessions are and what my compulsions are, it makes it so much easier to notice when you're doing it because you've just been living that way your whole life and you just think it's normal. And so you have to define them and then be able to work through them. So for me,
Small interjection for consciousness, right?
yes.
The Conscious and Curious podcast.
So
Get
like
conscious.
that's like one of the essential things about it is that you can't make any headway with any of this without consciousness, which is why we're doing the education today. And
Yeah.
and curiousness is so essential. That's how you stop the cycle, is just
Why am I doing this? What does it really serve?
yeah,
Right?
what's going on here? Could this be OCD? And that's what my therapist actually taught my husband, um, is that I would be in the middle of like seeking reassurance for him and like wanting to have this long conversation about something to try and get to certainty. And we'd already had this conversation many times, but it felt just as urgent and unclear. And so she taught him, instead of engaging in that with me, which would be letting me do the compulsion, would be, could you be searching for certainty here? This kind of looks like you might be looking for certainty. Very
Mm.
curious, very gentle, very compassionate, instead of, oh, I'm not going to have this conversation with you again, or you're just doing OCD again. Because I'm going to be mad either way because I want it so bad. And then in that moment, I'll like, oh, yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, that's what this is. Or if it's one that's new, I'll be like, oh, maybe it is. Ugh, another one. But then I'm able to just do that pause and just stop and feel the
Yeah.
frustration and that urgent need of wanting it so much and knowing this isn't going to help and having to just not do it.
How long do you feel, or yeah, I guess, how long do you feel you've been struggling with it?
Oh, my whole
Do you
life.
feel like there was a time as you were young that you don't feel like you were struggling for certainty?
Oh, that's such a hard question to answer. Um, well, there's the awareness part and then the unawareness part, the consciousness, right?
Mm.
Like we're doing that as a normal human our whole life. Like that is a normal quest for a child. Like, is this red? Is this blue? Like, but there's a
Yeah.
difference to the extent that we take it. Because like searching for certainty is healthy in some ways. And then there's the belief that there will be certainty that's unhealthy, and the belief that we can't accept it in most places. But like then there's the belief I want, will my parents protect me and keep me safe and love me? Like that's a great one to look for. So that's a
Yeah.
very complex question.
True.
For
And
someone,
it really is a complex matter. Like, as
yeah,
we were talking about all these different veins that we can discuss on this topic,
yeah,
that it really is very complex. And I think because as human beings, like you said, we're naturally looking for certainty in some way and safety in some way. I mean, if you want to go back to cavemen and
totally.
Neanderthals and where's my cave versus, I want to sleep out in the open with all the jaguars, that necessarily wasn't, it probably wasn't necessarily a compulsion. until they were in their cave and there's a blocked boulder and they're still looking for jaguars, and they're like, okay, maybe we're compulsive now,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, it's such an interesting, we're constantly looking for some kind of safety, some kind of certainty. And I know a lot of us grow up saying, oh, I'm a control freak. I'm a control freak. I've said that so much in my life. Oh, I'm just kind of a control freak. I need to be the one driving. I need to be the person doing this. So I think really, yeah, it's so conflatable with what's
Yeah.
safety versus what's the compulsion and when's it actually interfering with my life. It's a very hard line to draw.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember so many things as a child. Like, I remember when I was young, um, being concerned about diabetes because my grandpa had it and died of diabetes, and my cousin, who was 2 years older than me, was diagnosed of it. While I was that age, and I remember eating a lot of sugar one day, or maybe it was more than days, but I remember exactly what I'd eaten a lot of, and I was crying in my bed at night to my parents, sure that I was going to get diabetes because of that. And so part of that, asking them and being confused is needed. There's this healthy reteaching they needed to give me of how you get diabetes, and then also that that one time isn't going to do it, but also the extent to how much I had been thinking about it all day, and how much I really conflated the truth of it and the severity. And so there's all kinds of layers there, and I can give you story after story like that.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. And that's very relatable for me
Yeah.
actually too. And I think most people, right? Because that's a childhood tendency to all of a sudden insert a fear over something, especially something new, like what is this diabetes and it kills
Yeah.
people?
Yeah.
And then, okay, now, but where would that the best parenting practice be of like, well, trust your body or trust yourself. And, you don't have moderation's a good thing. And right. Um, but I think for myself personally, I know I have unfortunately inserted a lot of a lot of fear into my kids, which I'm seeing the other side of now. But yeah, like you said, it's good in some aspect. Yeah, I want my kids to be healthy and health conscious, but not impulsive.
Yeah. I don't
Yeah.
remember any of my siblings having that fear, the way that I did.
Oh,
It's a different way of you taking information and what you do with that. So,
yeah.
yeah. So back to the list of my obsessions. There's maybe 10 or 12 of these. So if you want to stop me anytime you can, but this either obsession or an intrusive thought or something that just I spend time with. And some of these are kind of dormant right now because I've done so much therapy. Some of them still show up. And if they show up, it's like I notice it and I feel it and I catch it like that. Like sometimes it's
Okay.
within seconds, sometimes it's within minutes. Other times, and this isn't very often, but sometimes it'll be like an hour or two, and I'm, whoa, I was really into that one.
Yeah.
Anyway, people will unnecessarily suffer. That really is a problem to me. Like, and I need to save them. Or
Mm.
it is wrong if this is happening that cause people to unnecessarily suffer. Um, I will be misunderstood. I need to explain things perfectly. I need to try to make sure I'm not misunderstood. I need certainty, but not with everything, just certain things. And there's a strong, rigid black and white thinking that accompanies that. Things need to be right. And if things aren't right, that's a problem. And then we're talking about right and wrong. And like rules need to be followed. Um, I have a responsibility to keep other people happy. And this is another problem with coaching because coaching taught that you can get over people pleasing and perfectionism. It's all in your thoughts. So you can think differently. But when it's OCD, you can't. And when it's
Mm.
trauma, you also have to be healed. And so part of these things for me were like it's some attachment trauma and some of them are OCD. And so there were different methods of healing some of these different things. Some of them can be healed and some of them will just always pop up randomly, but it won't be as intense when there's some healing done. So, um, have I done enough to fix things or resolve things? Or did I miss an important part of the situation? I need to make sure I understand it correctly and I've done like my part. The fear of the possible consequence of being found out about something, even if I'm fine. Worrying about being unworthy of respect or appreciation or love. There's an inflated sense of responsibility is very high. like my responsibility for things or for other people, and can get really wrapped up in thoughts of wanting to know the deep significance or the why, like really needing to track down what went wrong and how to make it right. So,
Wow, that's your list.
yeah. And that's the obsession part. So that then the compulsion part are the things that I would do to relieve the anxiety that those things create, to try and
Okay.
make things feel better. And so then I would do things to try to save people, to try to protect people. And this could be one person or like the whole church or the whole community or like my whole family. Do things to make things right, to make things done right, things to be right, and to make sure people don't suffer. I'm going to educate people. I'm going to have long conversations. I'm going to do research. I'm going to teach. I'm going to have the long conversations and discussions to try and explain myself and make sure I'm understood. I'm going to do things to try and manage people's emotions and keep them happy and sacrifice myself. I'm going to follow rules and I'm going to research. I already mentioned that, and check and correct and try to control things and analyze and try to figure things out. Those things sound like they could be normal, healthy things. And like, to an extent, we want to sacrifice for the good of others. But again, is there urgency? Is there a compulsion behind it? This necessity? Is there anxiety behind it? Do I have actual agency and choice? What happens if I don't do it? How high is the anxiety? And that's another trick to show yourself. What if you don't do the thing you usually do? What happens in your body? Can you delay it? Can you not do it at all? Another one is just analyzing thoughts and words very specifically, like words and their definitions, and then repetitive behaviors or thoughts or rumination about how can I make this better? Like there is a way.
Mm. Yeah.
So this is like
And
this power. Like I
yeah.
then I actually do.
So the defining factor, because yeah, a lot of these sound very similar to anything I would hear from anyone, right?
Totally.
I talk to a lot of people, and a lot of people would say, "Oh, I have many or all of those." But the determining factor is the fear, right? Like, and if it's creating anxiety, as you mentioned, I'm just rehashing it. So creating anxiety, it's interfering with your life. So it's like, what would that look like in a like what in a day-to-day thing, say you're having one of these and the anxiety and the fear are coming up for you, and how does it look like it's interfering in your life? How does
Yeah.
that
And it's going to be different for everybody. But for me, so many of these things were happening that I thought it was normal being a charitable person. Like someone asks you to do something, you stop and you help them. But the difference is, do I stop and actually make a choice? And do I respond instantly? Like sometimes, or do I say yes and then my brain goes 100 miles an hour until I actually have the time to actually take the action? Like I'm in and I'm going and I'm not present anymore with whatever I'm doing. I'm elevated heart rate and nervous system trying to solve and fix this urgently, even though it's not an emergency. And so it's this creating something to an emergency level and spending all of my mental and emotional power, and that becomes my physical energy, which can cause physical chronic health problems without realizing that you're doing this because it just feels so normal. You've done it your whole life. And you also feel you get this dopamine kick of like, I have the answers. I can help this person. I could figure it out even if I don't know because I know how to solve, right?
Mhm.
And so it can be so subtle. And that's why it was missed.
Yeah.
So
So
subtle.
how did you find it? How did you determine that? Because you said you were doing therapy and you were already life coaching people. How did you determine this is actually not normal?
Yeah. Well, I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression 15 years earlier. And now that when I look back at going into the appointments with my medical doctor and my therapist, it was pretty clear to me because once you have OCD training, it's easy to spot it. But when you don't have it, it just looks like it just looks like anxiety or stress or depression. That's what it presents as because that's what comes out on the top when OCD is underneath. So to answer that question, I think good to see that my OCD was kind of OCD in upon itself because it was thinking about all the thoughts, over analyzing everything, which can be very similar to therapy and self-coaching and self-improvement and becoming a better person. But they're so similar that I just thought I was becoming a better person. So there was somebody who was just talking about OCD and all the scrupulosity and all the different ways it can manifest. Because when you Google it, which I had looked it up 15 years earlier, because I wondered if my daughter had it, because she was like wanting to repent or fixating on right and wrong and things. And it generally, you think of somebody who's constantly doubting if they're good enough or if God loves them or if they're continually repenting like all the time. And I was like, I don't do those because I don't let myself hardly do anything wrong. And I just had this gift of knowing that God loved me. And I hadn't let that come to a crisis. And there's not much to repent about if I'm So
You're like, I'm already doing every compulsion possible to make sure that I don't have to repent. Doesn't that make sense?
yeah. And so she was talking about these, like the mental compulsions of the analyzing, the fixing, the thinking, the how people pleasing, how perfectionism are subsets of OCD, um and also like this anger around certain topics and this real high resentment. Those are real key signs of just like, and coming back to certain issues. And something just kind of clicked, and I started talking with her and started talking to more people. And then I started finding how to talk to people who actually know about scrupulosity instead of just the general misinformation on Google. So
Isn't it? It's pretty difficult to even
yeah,
find people, even therapists
yeah,
don't have much
no, they
training.
don't. No,
I
it's
mean,
not part of
OCD
your
is
master's.
kind of here and there, right? But scrupulosity is like a whole subset. You'll find hardly anybody.
Yeah. Well, it's becoming more popular, more well known now because of this. But there's like, if you look on like Psychology Today, like just looking for somebody's bio in there, they might list OCD. But if they don't have, like, they don't specialize in it or they don't specialize in scrupulosity, I wouldn't go to them because it's just like, sure, I've helped with that. I know what it is, right? There's a difference in that specialization. So anyway, I asked her for referral and I just went to her therapist because I was like, okay. And then beyond that, I learned, and she taught me how to find someone. And then I had a different therapist after that. And I had a trauma therapist that specialized in people to help with the things. And like I said, the symptoms, I mentioned the anger, the resentment, the long conversations, getting coached on things over and over again. And then when I got the diagnosis, I had a bit of an anxiety attack and, well, more of a panic attack and an identity crisis, which is very classic after getting the diagnosis, because all of these things that you've been rewarded for and have become part of your identity are now labeled as OCD. And so then you wonder, who am I? If this is a mental illness, if this is not me, why was I even doing those things? What do I even like? What's even important to me? It's very terrifying. And I've seen it over and over again since then. And so at that time, we decided to do some medication to just be in a place that I could do the therapy and make sure that I was learning and practicing. And that word, make sure, I have to be very careful. That's a trigger word with OCD. You don't want to be making sure of anything, but we chose the medicine to assist me. um, and and that was very helpful to just do that work. Like, it was twice a week for a long time, just to work through and rewire and understand what's happening over and over again, to be able to call it out, choose what to do. And I also thought, like, researching is part of I actually like it. And there's a lot of teachings that if you enjoy the compulsion or the obsession, then it's not OCD. And so then I kept questioning, because there's still misinformation about, like, there's some therapists and coaches that are on Instagram that are teaching this, that if you enjoy it, it's not. And then there's people that specialize even more and say, no, it's that tricky that you can actually enjoy it, but there's something else underneath it. So again, it's sneaky, it's subtle, it's the sneakiest. And so scrupulosity is the hardest of all the OCD subtypes to get treatment on. And so then I thought I needed to shut down my business because what if my whole business is just an obsession and a compulsion?
Wow.
What if I'd caused harm to people in the past that I missed because I was helping people with anxiety? And I thought, I have no right to be doing this anymore. What if they had scrupulosity underneath? And I found some that I went through and I reached out to them and, and I realized, some of that. And then do I even have OCD? And that's the classic, you have OCD if you're questioning if you have it.
Oh, interesting. Huh.
Because she didn't even ask me the questions, like the diagnostic questions. And I only got one opinion and she knew immediately. And I don't have the classic symptoms. If I take a test online, I don't come out as a yes. And I don't wash my hands till they bleed. So my OCD isn't that bad. Like, here's all of the statements that I was spinning in my head. But what I was doing is the compulsion. I'm trying to find out for sure if I have it or not. And I'm looking for all the evidence. And that's what the brain does. It comes up with all of these reasons and evidence that you probably don't. And so then I ask her, and she tells me what I just said. This is classic. I could ask you the questions if you want, but you still won't believe me. You might believe me
Mm.
for a moment, which is what feeding the compulsion does, but then you'll come back again asking the questions again. And now that I am on the other side of it, when people come to me with anxiety, I can pick out the scrupulosity really quick, like she did. And so I get it now. Back then, I'm like, no.
Right. Especially when it's creating an identity crisis.
Really.
Yeah. And not to mention we both grew up in Mormonism, so that whole sphere is that really is an identity. I mean, it's your entire
Completely.
world. And so when you're being rewarded internally or externally for, oh, look how you served this person without hesitation. They were on my doorstep as soon as I had a need
You
within 10
followed a
minutes.
prompting even.
Yes, right. There's so many layers that can come through that's like, wow, was it really OCD? Was it not OCD? But yeah, we're being rewarded for a lot of these compulsions, actually. And
Yeah.
that's a huge identity.
Yeah. Like, do I even like my religion? Do I even have faith? Like, like, why do I do any of the religious things? Like, yeah, everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I just,
What was it? Was it compulsion? Was it because God actually told me? Was it because I actually felt the spirit? Or was this in my mind?
yeah.
Like not to like spin anybody in a
Yeah.
spiral
And
who's listening.
I know, because I'm like, am I just a hollow shell? Like, what am I? Like
Yeah.
it's very deep.
So
So
where did you go from there?
yeah, so she did with me ERP, which is the gold standard, what needs to happen in treatment, which is exposure and response prevention, meaning that you do exposures that are guided by a therapist trained in this, and you respond in a different way. So you can't just sit and face the uncertainty and watch the tension rise and fall, which is what a lot of people teach. Like, you can do it. You use enough self-compassion and handling discomfort in your body, but you also have to have a new response. So you're preventing the old response. So we did that. We also used DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy. And this is where you're using the way you think to be able to hold two truths at the same time, which is
Mm.
being able to sit in the gray, that there isn't a black and white, a right and a wrong. And that's very challenging for OCD. And so that's really essential. And then after I did most of the ERP and that, she passed me on to someone who could do ART, which is accelerated resolution therapy, and that's the trauma therapy. And that one is similar to EMDR, where you use rapid eye movement, but it's faster, and it just uses specific incidences instead of your whole chronological span. And it uses the back of your brain where you're creating images. It's kind of like parts work, and where it's more compassion based and
Mm.
bringing things together, because there were traumas that were connected to this that you wouldn't call a capital T trauma. Like, I never thought I had trauma in my life until understanding this better. But when I would go into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, because of the OCD things or some of my attachment trauma, then those are the things that needed to be healed. So worked through that. And then that therapist also used ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy, which is using the ability to, it's a lot of mindfulness. DBT also has a lot of mindfulness, but I can be in this present moment and accept and allow what is happening and choose to act with curiosity and compassion. And that's just essential to, like we mentioned, curiosity and consciousness. Like that's a lot of
Mhm.
what's happening. Like I can become aware, I can choose, and I can use these healthy skills to choose what I'm doing. And so through
Wow.
that whole year of doing that, I just found this huge relief and this big open space in my brain for the first time ever of there could be just nothing happening. And there could be, um, I don't have to spin on all of that. I can choose not to. And it's actually wise. And 15 years before that, I had done meditation courses with Buddhist teachers, and I would meditate for 45 minutes every day for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks. And it's not that I didn't achieve like stillness, and I didn't, like, I understood all those concepts, but it's different than when you can see the space that OCD was taking up.
Mhm.
And so like I just didn't know that it wasn't normal to feel this emotional, this intense, this much mental turmoil about religious or moral things. Like I just thought that was normal. I thought it was normal to spend that much time thinking. I thought I was doing it in my best interest or to become better. And because it was so
Yeah.
disorienting, I didn't talk about it for like 8 months. I think maybe one or two friends, maybe. I told like after the first week, and then like nobody until I really just got this grounding underneath myself because it just like pulled out from under me, right? And because how do you explain to anybody when you hardly understand what's going on?
Yeah.
2 years later, then I went in to do IFS, internal family systems or parts work, which can get underneath some of this and actually heal some of the wounds so that not all of them have to keep coming up, so that you're not constantly, you're like, oh, there you are, my love. That protective part. And sometimes you can ask a protective part to just take a different job and they don't have to do that anymore. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
It's so interesting what you're talking about these different techniques and tools, therapies that you've been through, because a lot of as I'm a yogic life coach and I've studied a lot of yogic philosophy and practices, a lot of them are actually taking core elements of
Totally.
old, very old and ancient meditation styles and mindfulness styles and like sitting with the neutrality, right? Not sitting in black
Totally.
and white thinking, sitting in curiosity and like holding the emotion and all these things like that's so fascinating to me. And even parts work, which I've done IFS for a little while as well. And I told her the therapist I had, I said, I was drawn to this because it reminds me a lot of the same theory of Kundalini yoga,
Yeah.
which I also teach, right? And that whole mentality of I'm actually whole. I'm whole at my core, and my true self is whole and
Yeah.
it's safe and it's perfect in the way it needs to be, but I have all these external factors, external parts of me that showed up to protect me, that showed up to survive something or whatever, and then, yeah, they could turn into some kind of compulsion or something like that. Um, so fascinating, but that same concept of, like, coming back to wholeness, coming back with curiosity, and that idea also of not sitting in black and white, because if it is scrupulosity, that is black and white thinking, right? Like, that's what else do you have to determine this is the right way or this is the wrong way
Yeah.
than black and white thinking, which is what is taught in religion. So it's so hard to like unravel that. Like, okay, so then what if they're both okay? What if all of this is okay? Yeah, man, that's such interesting work. And wow, so many things that you worked through. That's really fascinating to me too, that you have practice and experience in all these modalities, these types of therapy. And what did you find most effective for you specifically?
There isn't a most because like all of them are essential pieces of the puzzle. But I
Okay.
guess like now, like I lean into the parts work more often, or the just the general acceptance and compassion, like because I had that mindfulness Buddhist training 15 years ago, like that core curiosity and compassion, and like sitting with whatever rises and sitting with physical discomfort and allowing things to, like, that's at my core.
Mm.
So I come back to those things the most, but I'm doing exposures whenever I need to, like So you see what I'm saying? Like it all comes together, and I constantly catch myself in black and white thinking, and I hold two truths, and I settle into that. So I think that
Yeah.
having, I think having my husband and kids be aware and be able to have that gentle permission, having a solid educational understanding of what's going on. And then I think that maybe the other big one is just knowing and deciding what my values are, because that's a big part of ACT. Of you can either be moving towards or away from your values, but you always get to choose what your values are, and you get to
Mm.
like stake that wherever you want it to be, and then claim that sovereignty. And I think that was a really pivotal thing for me to remember, that I can allow all these other people to have their values and their black and whiteness, or their what's important to them, but I can choose to be over here, and that's important to me, and I don't have to solve and fix all that, and it can feel completely nauseating and panicky to me, but I can let it be. So I guess what
Right.
I'm describing right now is this kind of the center of all of that is developing sovereignty and psychological flexibility. And that is kind of central to ACT, of being able to be aware, the consciousness, and open to what matters most to you, and actively engaged in what you value and what matters to you. So you're moving in that direction, but then you're also open and willing to painful internal experiences, either intrusive thoughts or physical sensations in the body. You're allowing them to be here, not afraid of them or forcing them to go away or avoiding situations where you might have them. But you're open to that, and you know how to get unstuck from the intrusive thought or whatever it is. And so that's called diffusion. You diffuse from it, and you allow those things to come and go without getting caught in the scrupulosity trap of it, of believing or attributing more importance to it, and that you can just accept that's what it is and not get sucked into that. So then you're enhancing this awareness so you connect with the present moment. So you might notice there's the intrusive thought. I can have compassion towards myself and the OCD itself. I can accept what's going on. I can be willing to flow with this, to feel it rise and fall. And I can choose to come back to the present moment, and then use my awareness to use my five senses and everything. Of I can do the mental diffusion, do a little bit of an exposure, rise and fall, and return to my values in the present moment. So that might be like driving in my car and feeling the steering wheel and hearing birds or hearing the music and pushing that gas and feeling it, and literally focusing on the sensations in my body, rising and falling of the breath and the in and out, and just being right here, right now. And so that's when you come back to having this observing self perspective. Like it's like you observe what's happening instead of just believing everything that's in your head or in your experience as truth. But then you're choosing to be actively engaged in what you value. So it's that committed action to do what matters most. So that's that whole psychological flexibility concept. And I forgot at the beginning to give attribution to Deborah McClendon and Annabella Hangen, whose two books are the best on scrupulosity. I just wanted to make sure I said that again. They are two, and they're LDS, one with a doctorate and a master's. So some of that concept right there is from Annabella's book. But
Wow. What are their books called? Or is it two specific books or do they have
yeah,
more?
Freedom from Scrupulosity is Deborah's, and Imperfectly Good is Annabella's. And it was interesting to read them because it pulled together all of the things that I had learned through the years, and then it added more detail. And so it was really fun to see that. And as you said, like a lot of the things I just shared, like pull from all of those ancient roots too, and pull it all together in a framework that works for OCD.
And interesting when you mentioned like pausing, getting curious, checking with my body, like this, the tools that you're using consciously every day to work through compulsions and things like that, right? Like when you're driving. Um, all of these things now, I'm just tying back to actually some of our previous episodes because we were talking about when we're getting conscious about something, right? We're getting outside of the reptilian brain and we're getting into the forefront of like, now I'm making my conscious. Does that make sense? Right? Like, and instead of just letting our mind run the mill, we're getting conscious and being it's more of, in the way I would put it, my terms, is my true self gets to come into the driver's seat instead of just letting my mind run amok
Mhm.
and decide through the patterns and the habits and the need for safety, and getting curious, becoming mindful, feeling my body, feeling the steering wheel, all of those things. Um, do you feel like that those things really do help and diffuse? I know you said it's a diffusion technique, but when you're feeling anxiety, those do help you diffuse it.
Oh yeah. Like that's one of the essential things I teach for anxiety as well. Like that skill to be that self-aware and that in touch with your physical sensations is essential. Or else you just end up accelerating until you're in full anxiety attack and then you become aware.
Yeah.
But if you can catch it so much lower, the tools will help it just rise and fall instead of complete escalation and then hours of de-escalation.
Yeah. Would you agree with that? I mean, because I talk about mind body soul connection, and do you agree it's more of the mind? This is a mind issue?
No, no, what I
No?
meant was if you can become aware that before it escalates, then you use your body. But it's both. Like it's completely both. That like
Mm,
I guess I have to define what you mean by a mind issue.
I guess so. But it's because to me, I'm thinking like, yes, the emotions and sensations might be triggered in our body, things like that, but it's to put it this way, it's been said before, like the mind is a terrible master, but a powerful servant. So when it's like the mind becomes the master and it's running constantly overthinking and looking for a compulsive, I guess, a reason to be compulsive. Um, that's what I mean. It's like, is this a mind issue? Is it starting in the mind, where the mind is not so much the soul is in control, or the consciousness is in control, but the mind is.
Okay. Yeah. So in my terms, usually I talk about different parts of the brain. And that's why I thought we better clarify. We're talking about different
Good
organs
idea.
here.
Yes.
Yeah. So like there's like the reptilian part of your brain, and then there's the fear-based, and then there's the logical thinking part, but then there's also just like you say, the soul, if you want to talk about it in those ways, like what is me? But then there's that part of you that watches you. And I think that's what you're talking about when you're able to step aside and have that awareness and see what's happening. So
Yeah.
that's yeah. Like I think that's what makes sense. But like with OCD, it can be a trauma response where there's been no thought or mind that's driving it. It's a body response first. And so that's what I was clarifying.
Mhm. I see what you mean. Okay.
Sometimes it's not an intrusive thought that shows up, like your body is just in it.
Yeah.
And so I think that might be helpful if I share this OCD loop. Um,
Hmm.
And what I mean by this, and I'll explain this, is that if you just think of a circle, that at the top of the circle, we have a trigger. And that could be what I just mentioned. Your body could just have a response. You could feel something in your body, some kind of an impulse or an urge, but you might have an intrusive thought show up. It could be a memory. You see something, you have a physical sensation in your body, or just an idea. But these things are all normal things that happen. Someone without OCD will just notice that and move on to their next thing, or they'll choose what to do about it. Someone with OCD would then attach meaning to it, and it would become really important or really scary. It would in some way attach a threat. And so we need to do something about it. And because that meaning is attached to it, then the body feels a lot of anxiety or distress or fear. And so then that's when the body comes in if it's a thought first thing. If the body was engaged first, it was there, and then you attach meaning because my body feels scary, or then the thought comes, really quickly, and you know what's happening, and then anyway, so you're feeling this anxiety, and so then you have this urge to remove the anxiety, and that urge is really strong, and it feels urgent, it feels necessary, it feels crucial, it feels life and death even to people. I must get rid of this. It's horrible. It's just ruining everything. It's terrifying. Um, it's not always a level 10 like I'm describing, but it is for many people most of the time. For me, I usually notice it when it's much lower now. And so it doesn't have to get that high. But Because that urge is so strong, that leads us to do the compulsions. So the thing at the beginning that I first mentioned is the obsession that shows up, the intrusive thought, the urge, the need, the sensation. You first have a thing that's called the obsession that you start to spend time feeling scared about. And then the compulsion is what you would do to get rid of the anxiety, which is produced from the obsession. And when you do the compulsion, this could be the hand washing to make sure you don't have germs. This could be avoiding something. This is anything to try to gain certainty or to figure something out. You have a reassurance seeking where you ask people for sure, you do research, you confess, you do physical actions or repetitions with your body. You have certain mental rituals you go through. You're going to pray. When you do those things, you then gain temporary relief and you feel better. The problem is that as soon as you do that, that confirms the threat really was threatening and dangerous because you felt so much better. And so that continues the cycle that next time the obsession shows up, your mind remembers the relief and knows that I need to zip through this cycle really quickly to get to that relief. And you start doing them over and over and over again throughout the day without realizing it. Because each time you think, oh, I know how to get there and I can get relief. I know how to get there and I can do it. And I just do it. So the secret is to stop the cycle in between the urge to remove the anxiety and the compulsion. And that's where we would do exposures over and over again of exposing yourself to the obsession and feeling the urge and practice not taking that action or taking action instead of avoiding and feeling that and using all of those things we just talked about with flexibles, psychological flexibility and your values and compassion so that it stops that. And it actually reduces the intensity or how often the obsessions show up when you do the ERP.
Oh, wow.
Because it eventually gets bored with you. Like you're not do this anymore.
You're not completing the cycle. Come on. It's like, hey, now this is boring.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, that's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. That cycle that's very interesting and fascinating too. Because I'm realizing even more so now the mind and body, like you were talking about, and even in my own experience of like, yes, it's not just a relief to my mind. It's like a dopamine rush or a lower cortisol or something that's being impacted in my body. So then, yeah, my body might be a trigger later too, because they'll say like, "Hey, remember that?" And I'm going to build up this cortisol until you release it with doing whatever it is. And it was fascinating.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I think something else that was a really important part of my journey is that I obsess on words and definitions and specific meanings. And so I had to get really good at noticing when I was doing that and noticing which words are kind of triggering or problematic and being able to swap those out. So I do a lot of redefining when people are talking to me so that I can be like, actually, this word is better, or this is probably what they mean, or whatever they're saying, I need this word.
Interesting.
And so just like, and this happens a lot at church, or I don't know, even political things, speeches or whatever. I'll hear a certain word and I'll start to feel that. I'm like, oh yeah, okay, swap. Okay.
Mm,
And
yeah.
I could give, a lot of examples of that. And yeah, I was like, just the most recent time that happened, I went to the UVU Queer Institute and the teacher was teaching about this concept of how we're all chosen and going through a lesson of, if this is an LDS thing, if your audience is or isn't, but this concept that, in religion, God can say that you're chosen and that you're not chosen anymore.
Mm,
And so that was being taught in the scripture and how this person was then chosen again. And it was really important for her to know that the queer kids in the room, that they are all chosen and wanted. And it was a beautiful thing. But in my mind, I kept fixating on this word chosen that I hate because I'm like, well, if we're all chosen, then nobody's chosen. And well, I don't ever want to be more important than somebody else. And I want us to all be equal. And so my mind is spinning, right? And I'm noticing
mhm.
that and I'm frustrated. I'm starting to get upset about it. And why do you keep saying that? And so that's my hint to like when I start saying like, stop saying that word. I don't think it means what you think it means, and like, that kind of a frustration in me. And I noticed it really quickly. And so then I just stepped back. And at that moment, I was having a hard time coming up with something different. And whether you believe in God or you're like your higher self or whatever, of like, where in me, where can I find something that will help me here? Um, and the word that popped into my mind was, it means known and wanted.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean what you think it means. Like all the things that I was like, nah, and so then I just paused and said, oh, I know my children and my grandchild so well. And I choose them over and over again. I want to be with them. And the kids in that class, as I have gotten to know them, each their unique things about them, like the more I know them, the more I want to be with them. And I choose them. I choose to be there. And it just dropped all of the physical reaction and the mental spinning. And it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, or if that's what the scripture meant or what the teacher meant or whatever. But for me, it was huge.
Yeah.
And so I do that all the time. And at the end of class, I actually raised my hand and I'm like, you keep saying that. And and other people said, yeah, that was kind of bugging me too. And other people are like, doesn't bug me at all. I love that, And so it's not this thing of what's the doctrine and what's right, what's wrong, you know?
Well, I love that. Thank you for sharing, first of all, but that that really brings it back to our experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, what's real for me? And not that everything out there, I feel like, at least in my experience of OCD, it's sort of like, what is the truth out there? Like, I'm missing something and I need to be certain of it because I don't know everything and I need to be certain, instead of coming back to what's my experience is what matters for me.
Yeah.
And I can, and like you said, there's like, make these little changes and go to my intuitive self, my higher self, my God, whatever it is, to tap into what does that mean for me? What's a beautiful way for me to understand what this really means? Because I would agree. I'd say chosen sounds like a black and white word, right? Like, okay, so what if everybody's chosen? We don't need the word chosen.
Yeah. And why would
Uh,
we want to be better than others and put others below?
Yeah, exactly. And just for clarification, when you said the Queer Institute, you mean it's an LDS class, an
It's an
LDS
LDS class specifically for
Institute
queer kids.
class.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. That's beautiful. I didn't even know they had that. So it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. My
Um,
daughter and friends have invited me to that, different of those friends there. Yeah. And so there's another
amazing.
aspect of my OCD that might have shown up previously, which is I need to correct the teacher and I need to prevent harm from the rest of the kids in the class. And so then I noticed that, like, no, I don't have to do that. If I choose to, am I doing it from a compulsion? Would I be doing it because why? And I didn't raise my hand until the end of the class. I gave it time. I waited to see, like, does this feel good to share? Is this, why am I sharing? Is it urgent? And there was another thing that she kept saying. There was a certain word that I really felt like needed to be corrected. And I just let it sit and I switched it in my mind. And then after class, like, do I talk to her? And there's a lot of times I just let things go to make sure, like, that might be OCD. Let's not do it. But this time I engaged with her in a conversation about it. And she said, how interesting. Like I don't think about it at all that way. And I said, for me, this is why it's painful. And for some others, it might be too. And so we just exchanged this, oh, that's interesting, instead of, you're right, I'm wrong. I'm big, you're little.
Mhm.
Like that whole kind of
Yeah.
let us engage in understanding each other. And that's very
Yeah.
different than a compulsion or obsession.
And that feels like it's really I think a lot about the future, where we're headed. And I think that's more the better way to, I don't want to say better either. um,
More
but
intelligent.
a healthy way to engage with people, right? That same idea that I can sit in neutrality, I don't have to be right or wrong. Even in our relationships, that type of OCD shows
So
up, right? And like, I need to tell you why I am correct and no, you are not correct. And let me show you the evidence, therefore, right? Instead, having these, that's so interesting. That's your experience. And I am open to that. And it doesn't mean we have to agree with anybody that, or, change the way we behave necessarily, but being curious and let me know your experience. And yeah, because I can see that OCD tendency showing up in just the way we interact as people. And that I feel is shifting.
Mm.
We saw that. We were on a retreat, Divine Feminine retreat together, and in like certain yoga trainings I've been in, there's many groups of people I've been in where this is the new way, or it seems like a new way of interacting. It's open-hearted, it's open-minded, it's not black and white, it's curious. I love that. Thanks for
Yeah.
bringing that up.
Yeah. It all comes back to that self energy that we talked about of, can I get grounded in that and that curiosity and compassion and really just be okay with me before I engage in religion itself. Like that's kind of what I have to do before I engage in something that's potentially triggering, things that are have a high moral right or wrong, politics or just different things like that. Of like, am I grounded in that space? And remembering that I know who I am and that I have my own values and I have the power to choose here. I make sure I do that as often as I can before I enter a space, but also when I notice something happen before I take an action. And that's another tool that is really essential in knowing that I have strengthened my capacity to feel uncomfortable and ride through that dysregulation without panic. And and like I can move through all of the mental parts of the black and white and understanding stages of faith, and like that's the brain part of it too. But it's coming back to that. I do have this agency, I do have sovereignty, and I can even do that in the middle of an OCD loop.
Mhm. For me, that's why I do my meditations in the morning and I have my quiet time in the morning because I have to get grounded for my day, especially as a mom. You know, you're going to be pulled right and left, and your mind, you're going to be triggered, and like that, that's going to happen here and there. So, for me, that's my grounding. That's when I get connected to, my higher self and what I term God. And
Yeah.
that's how am able to make it through the day in peace and neutrality and all those things. So, yeah. What are your rituals or your routines in the way that you handle it daily?
Well, there's the 5 second ritual, there's the 2 minute ritual, and there's
Yeah.
the 4 hour ritual. I mean, yeah, I do the meditation as well. I do simple things like my five senses or uh outside. Yeah, I use outdoors all the time, or literally, doing something with my inner self, my inner child, doing anything I can to get into that curious, compassionate. Sometimes it's an image, sometimes it's thinking of someone that's easy to feel that way towards. Um, so it's just like, how quick do I need to do it? And is it a preparatory, or is it a like a preventative, or is it a in the moment, what's the word, regulative, like, oh, I instantly need to get there, you know what I mean? So like it could
Mhm.
be the thing, like one of the main things I do is throughout the day I'm doing a lot of body scans, and I have a kind of a hyper awareness of my thoughts and my body sensations. And I actually didn't know until recently that that's also a form of OCD. But just this really hyper aware and wanting to do it right kind of a thing. Like I didn't even realize that, of like, if I'm aware, then I can do, it's like this other level. It's kind of weird, but
Yeah.
it's such a benefit too. Like all things, like that's what I learned through all the meditation and mindfulness, is that if I'm aware, then what I'm doing during the day is I'm just having little ups and downs, and I'm coming back to the centered self energy, this groundedness multiple times a day without as much extreme work to realign. And
Yeah.
so that's like my most basic practice there.
Okay. And you mentioned before that you had considered when you kind of had this crisis, like this identity crisis, should I even shut down my practice and things like that? How did you come through that?
It's a good question. Um, well, I mean, I canceled all my calls for a couple of days and just was in a lot of anxiety and panic. I haven't thought about that for a while. So it was like 4 years ago. So I think, I mean, it was a combination of talking to people who know me, like my husband, or remembering clients that know me and understanding some of that grayness of it, that accepting I could have done something harmful and that we all do. And maybe grieving and maybe choosing, well, I have a choice here. I could. I could do whatever. And like, what do I want to do? So it's really hard to come through that and feel the yuck first. Like there's a lot of just feeling how yucky that was. And it's not an obsessive yuck. There was some real yuck
Yeah.
because it doesn't feel good to have hurt someone unintentionally. That is, I mean, it's one of my obsessions too. Like it really feels yucky
Hmm.
because I have such intention to be kind and to be helpful. So it hurts even more. Like to other people are like, you had no idea. What does it matter? Right. But like at my core, like that just is not okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. And I would say maybe it's possible too that that's an aspect of your true self.
Yeah. Like I
Could
can't,
that be that's an aspect of your true self to say, I I am a kind person.
it's one of
I
my
am,
values that I,
yeah, that's something important to me to be kind and to not try to harm others.
and to be
And
careful not to.
then the like shadow side of that would be, but maybe I intentionally or unintentionally, sorry, not intentionally, unintentionally have harmed or do harm.
Because we
And
can't perfectly avoid all of that. So it's that
yeah,
acceptance of reality. And in trying so hard to not harm people, I can harm myself.
right. And that's often also the way people interpret what's happening. Maybe we didn't intend to harm at all and we intended to uplift,
Yes.
but somebody else just interpreted it in a way that was harmful. And so yeah, it's pretty much impossible to walk throughout life to not have some instance that's going to be like that. And that's, I think, one of the hard conceptions for an OCD mind to grasp, right?
Totally. Totally. I mean, it's the same thing as like being understood. Like, no matter how hard you try to be understood or to not harm, we cannot control that. And so, like, that's that, like, under allowing the gray, like believing, like, where OCD makes you believe you have that control and that capacity and you have that importance of relieving that and having more of a realistic, like, why would I ever think I could do that?
So OCD really is a misconception of control in one form of definition. Um, yeah, interesting. Because, yeah, that's the same thing as I'm trying so hard to make sure that people are pleased, right? Or that I'm not misunderstood or any of those things. Um, or that I won't get sick, or, there's all the other avenues too, right? Or that people won't break into my home. Um, but as much as you lock your doors, somebody could break a window, right? And there's always something on the side there that gives the illusion of control. And that reminds me of a quote I'll interject real quickly. And it says, it's a saying that people would say in the East, supposedly, whoever told me. They said, in the West, you say, oh no, I don't have control. I'm not in control. I'm not in control. And they said, oh, but in the East, we say, oh, thank God, I am not in control. Like, oh, interesting. Nice shift there. It's things like that that are helpful for me, like the different ways of processing and thinking uh of like what is control anyway? How do I manifest this? And do I even want control? Or how much do I actually trust that things will work out? That to me is where it shows up the most. But yeah, and it helps a lot to have those kind of ideas.
I
So
think what you're
interesting.
saying too is that when we talk about OCD, kind of what it is and logically, often I feel really stupid. Like, why would I fall for any of that? Like, this is so logical. And I think that's really, really important to have compassion for when the obsession is there and the urgency for certainty is there. You're not in your logical thinking mind, and it feels so real. And that's why people are so stuck, is because it's so sneaky and tricky, and it gets you to believe that it's real and true and necessary. And so then when you fall for it, you feel kind of dumb. You feel gullible, like it's not a very good feeling. And so again, believing it's not that I'm not smart. It's not that I'm not whatever, whatever, whatever. It's that this is a real thing.
Thank you. Yeah. Some final thoughts. So what do you think, Jill? What are your closing
Yeah,
remarks?
um I would continue to listen to the rest of these episodes or any of my other OCD episodes on my website. And then we'll put in the show notes the IOCDF website, the OCD Federation website, where you can get the accurate information. And then I'll have a resource there of how to get a diagnosis and making sure that it's from someone who's specially trained.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. And thank you for sharing so much of your information and your story and how this has impacted you in your life and how you've come through and healed and the tools that you're using. And we were talking before the show of just how important we both feel this is for people to be informed because it is so impactful to so many people's lives. And a lot of us just don't have a name or a label for it. And then to see like this actually isn't, I would say, I don't want to use the word normal necessarily because I don't really think there's a normal, but there is a way to live with a more peaceful mind. There is a way to live more at ease and without so much anxiety. Um, so I want people to know that it is hopeful. If you feel like this is just the way life is and everybody feels this way, it might not be that way. Then just give that an alternative. So thank you so much, Jill. And yeah, we'll put in the show notes your information. And anything else you'd like to add?
I'm happy to answer questions too and help direct people. They can reach out to me. On my website, there's a link, or Jill at jillfreestone.com.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. I love seeing you, Jill, and getting to talk with you. She's one of my very dearest friends. And to me, she is a wise sage. And I really, really appreciate everything Jill brings to the table. And she's a wonderful presence and knowledge. Thank you so much. And please stay conscious and curious, everyone, and join us next time for our next episode with Jill Freestone. Thanks so much. Take care, everybody.